It's worth noting I'm being kind of broad about the story given both versions are written by the same author, Scott Smith, who had not even finished writing the book by the time adaptation rights were purchased. Both versions are not tremendously different, mostly changes and omissions here and there that leave the film disappointingly condensed in comparison, hence why I highly recommend the book for the grander, more insidious details, yet the key difference is that the book is much grimmer than the film due to its heavier nihilistic themes. Nonetheless, it's a story about survival as the group's leader Jeff, a doctor in training, tries to ration supplies, find a way off the temple, and more or less try to keep everybody alive and sane. One of the main criticisms you'll hear about the film is its gratuitous graphic violence, and while I do believe some stories aim to shock for the sake of dramatic effect rather than any intellectual purpose, here I feel it justifies itself with a constant feeling of desperation, panic, and claustrophobia as the vines encase the temple more and more. It didn't help that at the time of its release, the torture porn phase and even the whole tourist terror concept had become exhausting that the ruins wasn't bringing anything new to the table, if indeed I think it's by far a more exciting concept than many of these other efforts. But it's a situation that warrants a grisly, visceral approach because the characters are fighting against both the agonizing heat, lack of food and water, fearing for their lives, and of course the vines that both figuratively and literally get in their head. Both the book and film get right to the bare bones of random, inconsequential horror that's scary purely because it's scary. It's not trying to make a point of it or allude to some cautionary tale. It's a pretty clever, fantastical dramatization of nature's dense, all-consuming presence, where in the jungle you're no longer the apex in control of the situation. That's what I mean when I say it has a Lovecraftian-esque flair to it. It doesn't have to be about elder gods or cosmic nothingness. It's abstract realism. Here you have these vines that are seemingly omnipotent and capable of mimicking sounds, manipulating people into paranoia and later insanity so they turn against not only each other but themselves. And then there's the fact that the Mayans clearly know what this is but are hopeless to understanding its motive or how to stop it. While it never explicitly states anything, I feel the book does allude to the idea that it's basically some sort of ancient evil that needs sacrifices to appease it, which would explain why the group are forced to stay on the temple as opposed to the Mayans just putting them out of their inevitable misery. I mean, put it this way, why force them into quarantine to stop it from spreading when they're just going to die anyway? It's not like the Mayans are stuck in a moral dilemma, it just seems a bit more suspect than that. After all, it is based on Mayan myth. They believe heavily in deities and sacrificial rituals to appease gods, so it's not impossible to interpret the vines as being controlled by some cursed evil spirit monster god thing. Take the Yuncax, for example, a Mayan deity said to protect hunters from wild plants and animals, and if you pissed it off, nature would be unleashed as an aggressor. Or hell, even consider various Mayan sacrificial practices like execution via bow and arrow or bloodletting, which was said to be used as a way of releasing energy used by spirits. Yeah, I'm clearly reaching a little, but it works to keep the mystery very contained, and make you question if it's a force of nature or higher power. One of the more poignant elements of the story is how it shows the characters trying to reassure themselves that everything will be okay, because nobody expects something this dire to ever happen to them until, obviously, it does. There's a sense of delusion and false hope that manifests only forward to later the window as the characters succumb to the realization that they're just another random group of unremarkable victims who were never destined to defeat this thing. I know it makes it hard to focus, but it's a core condition for this particular scenario. It's meant to embrace a tragedy none of us ever wish to experience, and there are many instances where you think a solution is possible only for it to fail. The thing is, the characters are intelligent for the most part. They don't do stupid things for the sake of drama, and when they do, it's rationalized by their increasing heat exhaustion, dehydration, and the obvious fear of death that surrounds them each passing moment. It essentially becomes a bit of an endurance test, and where the book and film greatly differ is in the conclusion, and it's debatable which ending you might prefer. None of them are positive, but it's necessary to reinforce the harrowing nature of the story. In the film, Jeff sacrifices himself so that his girlfriend Amy can escape, only for her to realize that the vines are growing inside her, while the alternate ending sees a caretaker inspect the vines that have grown around Amy's grave. I find in the version, instead of showing the vines inside one, the film abruptly fades to black, which could be explained by the director wanting to give us some sense of levity for what he described rightfully as a punishing film. The book's ending, on the other hand, it's bleak to say the least. Instead of Amy escaping, she feels hopeless for losing her friends and thinks that by killing herself, her body can act as a warning to deter any future people from exploring the ruins. However, as she lies dying, the vines drag her away, hence the group didn't notice any warning signs when they arrived because they were hidden by the vines. Now, saying it like that sounds kinda daft, but what I really like about it is that it goes back to that Lovecraftian ancient curse ambiguity. Maybe this was nature just being a dick, or maybe it's something bigger, grander, and more divine that we never see. But in either case, that's not what matters. People go missing in dense jungles and forests all the time, and that's what the ruins captures in its uncertainty. It goes back to the old-age philosophical question, if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, in the case of the story, if there's an evil lurking in the jungle but nobody left to reveal it, was it even there at all? Hey, thank you so much for watching and sticking around until the end of the video.
How this started when we discovered the benefits of local raw honey to our family.
And then we said, hey, you know what? This is your business right here.
We went out and started to sell it.
To help us get going, we got
Folks, so just before we begin, if you're curious to check out the film from today's topic, or even from my previous content, well, Shudder has kindly sponsored this video. If you didn't know, Shudder is a premium... Shudder is only $5.99 a month or $56.99 a year, but if you go to Shudder.com and use my promo code Ryan, you can get a 30-day free trial to test it out for yourself. And if you need another movie to give you a gentle persuader, well, let's talk about VHS. There is something intrinsically shocking and scary about the opening of VHS. I don't think there's anything more harrowing or gruesome shown later on that detracts from how this chaotic raw footage represents how unconsciously uncivilized many of us have gradually become. Of course, we might just be witnessing the behavior of petty criminals, but it's the broader implications of the commentary, how in a day and age of relentlessly rampant video culture, we've normalized how appropriate and comfortable we are filming everything that we do. and nothing perpetuates this bewildering acceptance more than the commanding presence of social media. Despite VHS being 8 years old and released during the immense surge of online servitude, it's scary how the things shown in the opening and later throughout are reinforced by influencers and people who lack a moral or social compass each and every
What you
day.
mean?
You think Logan Paul filming a dead body was anything new? Well, VHS showed us how prevalent this desensitized behavior already was. And that's not just referring to the dehumanizing and inhumane videos that can be found surprisingly easy with a quick Google search. I know that seems like a lot to pull from what is a very conventional anthology of found footage shorts that mostly aim to celebrate the subgenre in all its purity, but given the explicit nature of its setup, it's hard to look past the portrayal of eating lifestyles without becoming worried and normalized. Sure, we constantly criticize and rebuke it, but we do so with increasingly defeated disposition. I'll be straight with you. I find VHS to be kinda underwhelming for the most part, given the talent involved, like Adam Wingard, Ty West, David Bruckner, and the Radio Silence team, who all collaborate on each other's films. However, I think my disappointment stems from having seen VHS after watching each director's later efforts, and ultimately setting high expectations for a film clearly on a very limited budget, and being a first-time production for Bloody Disgusting. That's not to say they're bad by any means. The concepts are good, it's just the execution that leaves a lot to be desired, primarily because they go on for way too long and lack the substance to keep them interesting. Although I can't deny its representation of the homegrown independent spirit of 70s, 80s, and 90s American horror, where it embraces the schlock and camaraderie of unstructured filmmaking, even if the films take themselves more seriously than they probably should. There's also the cynical side, where it's easy to feel like these films are concept pitches for feature films, which was actually the case for VHS's most popular short, Tonight, which was adapted into a pretty decent spin-off called Siren. But anyway, going back to its qualitative angle, I think VHS does have a recurring theme throughout each film that you could say semi-interlinks them. Now, it is worth bearing in mind that this is one thirsty bitch of a movie where literally everyone is on the hunt for pussy, so as you can tell, I'm trying my hardest to edit around the constant nudity. Since I brought it up numerous times before, the obligatory danger associated with sexual promiscuity, popularized by slasher flicks and brought to full-blown attention in Nightmare on Elm Street, is an easy and obvious theme to latch onto, but more so because each story comes with its own cautionary tale or comeuppance angle related to the subject matter. Amateur Night is basically about date rape, Second Honeymoon is about infidelity and toxic relationships, Tuesday the 17th is a don't do drugs deal, The Sixth Thing That Happened to Emily When She Was Younger is an allegory about mental illness, 10/31/98 has a bit of a stranger danger concept I guess, and Tape 56, which serves as the framing narrative, is just, don't be a dick. Although you can refer to my original point in the opening. All of these ideas come across when you actually look beyond the concept itself and consider who or what the true villain of each story is. In Amateur Night, our protagonists are three utter pieces of shit who use a hidden camera to film their own amateur pornography, which more or less becomes attempted rape where they invite two inebriated vulnerable girls back to their motel room, and the guys get their comeuppance in the form of a succubus who proceeds to rip their dicks off. In Second Honeymoon, a couple have a tense trip across America where the boyfriend is exposed as a selfish prick who clearly doesn't care for or even trust his girlfriend, and his comeuppance is presented as a twisted irony where it's revealed that a stalker following them throughout is actually his girlfriend's lover, who then proceeds to violently murder him. Tuesday the 17th, clearly a play on Friday the 13th, which I think is by far the most interesting concept, as this killer glitch that begins appearing after the group uses drugs. Granted, I am taking a major leap of faith with this one because the twist is a bit more narrative heavy. Essentially, one friend reveals that she lured the group as bait to track down and kill the glitch for murdering her previous friends, only for it to end with the glitch apparently possessing her, which I decided to theorize as an implication that she was the killer this entire time because drugs are bad and make you crazy. I mean, it's not technically the most uncommon concept.
I did it!
My theory about the sick thing that happened to Emily when she was younger actually emerged from the title itself. This one shows us a series of video chats between an anxious girl called Emily and her boyfriend James as she begins to grow noticeably unstable and she ends up self-harming and talking to mysterious voices within her apartment. You know for a fact a twist is coming, but it does a great job at selling Emily as someone who is mentally ill and possibly having childhood trauma, eventually being diagnosed as schizoaffective to explain her delusions, mood swings, and strange behavior. Yet the twist is that her boyfriend James was monitoring her this entire time, as she is the unknown host of Alien Babies, and James is in charge of monitoring several different hosts, manipulated into thinking their lives are free will, when they're in fact controlled by the boyfriend. Another theme of toxicity, you could say. However, October 31st, 1998 is the one short to this snuggle theory because I really have to reach far to thematically twist it to fit my narrative, but nonetheless, it still maintains a relative consistency to the core premise of VHS. 10/31/98 ends the film with a dramatic crescendo by using more prominent visual effects when it turns out that the haunted house attraction that a group of friends think they stumbled into is, would you believe it's actually haunted by a poltergeist. Again, the twist is very simple. The group think the cultists they discover in the attic are the villains and rescue the girl, only for it to turn out that the cultists were actually performing an exorcism and the girl ends up killing all of them. Like I said, you could interpret it as a don't trust strangers concept because you can never judge a book by its cover. It all spirals back to tape 56. What's left is an archive, a legacy, if you will, one that preserves an ugliness, a lens into humanity's broken shell. Sure, VHS at its core is a nostalgic reminder of a simpler time in horror cinema, but it's possible to perceive it as a profoundly consolidated symbol of the genre in modern times. Because like with any home video, our efforts to record and contain truths and actualities are not impenetrable to distortion and illusion, whether they're the things we wish to cherish and hold onto, or things that, in retrospect, we'd wish to forget.
on the farm just looking. Can't find anyone looking for them. What's that song?
I command the demon. None can oppose Master Bobby.
I'll just beat everyone! Yeah! You did it!
Oh, too bad. That's nice.
I'll just beat everyone! Yeah! 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 Haha, you see that? I'll just beat everyone! Eat this! Flying donut! Take that! Yup, nice way to kill time!
And if so, who would these men? Nobody wants to talk about how future created villages of single mothers and fatherless children, or how many kids boosted up. We just want to talk about the relationship doesn't work. You move on, and how long it takes to move on as a kid. Some men don't like this ideology because the more women grow up, the less on. You can't be okay. The less women said, oh my God.
I'll just beat everyone! You see that?
I command you. None can oppose Master Bobby.
I'll just beat everyone! Now I'm really mad!
You knew it too. You were like, I guess I'll go. I'm not waiting for this to good.
I'll just beat everyone!
Because I didn't get an answer?
Your dry skin. I know I can be challenging.
The 228 is but that enthusiasm quickly turned to steam and James force proved inexperienced and reckless. He listened and when he spoke to an American soldiers, a cigarette vendor resulted in shots being fired sparking a violent enemies which was met with the retaliation of China's brutal national revolution. You can still find footage of the incident followed online, but the violence disturbing but the general action of soldiers were considered a symbol of faith and chief stated we would rather for a long time listen to good this was the advice of the Chinese have dubbed the White Terror, one of which paranoia and fear any slight or perceived infraction against the Chinese government can lead to entire families disappearing, and those infractions can be designated as offenses of terror translating according to official numbers of China at the time, 1 million the examination of census data by Chinese scholars shows that figure closer to 20,000. Of course, I think this actually lived through terror. Those experiences of paranoia and depression, the feeling of always being watched and never knowing when a classroom will not just disappear. Detention to me is horror at its most powerful, filled with cathartic creative scares, but using that fear to convey the very real terror that and in doing so, turning the horror of detention into a tool for empathy. Let us experience the bodies and traumas of people Detention was Red Cowboy's first game, and given how distinct it was, I was keen to see what this would be next. And whatever I might have expected, I never could have anticipated. Devotion draws on history and culture.
He said he really trying to get our attention. He's trying to hang out. I already know because he texted me. I already know that.
Have you said your prayers?
All he said was, you want to hang out for a bit today? I'll call him again.
Have you said your prayers?
Life until his hands begin to tremble and his vision blurs, and we awaken in the same apartments and leaving us with the question: what exactly happened to the demon? From here, we give you freedom to explore the details, but this is small and setting questions. What is Fingers here in the portrait? Is the interview is not? And who is the woman who seems to be mysterious? Devotion asks these questions with strong and setting imagery, and it's the intrigue of those mysteries that pulls us to the game's office. As we explore from violence and
I'll be your opponent.
I'm doing now. I mean, you use from pretty much every platform, I think, kind of equal kind of.
Show you how it's done. I'll devour you all.
I'm really just telling him I'm busy.
I'm here. Show you in full power.
sense of place and culture. And I love this. If you've been watching my videos for any length of time, you'll know what a fool I am for some good, strong storytelling. To me, there's no more interesting way to bring life into a fictional character than to have that character reflected in the moment around them. And it's this kind of intimate world building that devotion does so well. There's a scene earlier when you use apartments on the day they first begin. You can tell us decorated into rooms with different people. But as you do, the apartment itself begins to transform, going from an empty set of rooms to something that feels like an actual home. And as it does, it reveals all these little insights into who these people are. For example, we found that we found the mother of the dudes used to be a famous...
Don't even try it. What's the matter? Given up already?
Between us and them. After this sequence, the dudes felt like neighbors to me. People I might not have had any real relationship with, but who I had these little glimpses of lives. Another great example is the sequence where Maijn wants his daughter to show up in a store again, and the game turns into a puzzle as Maijn draws in the own piece of the story. And it's little moments like this that really creates the sense of dudes as a family who are at one point in their life. And it's the feeling that makes the later events of devotion so good. Feeling the kind of feeling that happens in the middle of return as domestic. The best way to think of domestic horror is like this. If cosmic horror is fear of some gargantuan unknowable entity potentially residing in the deepest reaches of space,
Have you said your prayers?
it's the fear of the familiar. The person who will witness it, the family of elements within. The idea that there could be some deep, unknowable madness or evil.
Have you said your prayers?
But this time, it's Maijn losing the contest by a single point. And when the announcer reads out her results, the television starts skipping. This point is the separate
Don't even try it.
Why bigger than that? No specifics. What's going on, to be honest with you. Huh? He said almost, though.
What's the matter? Giving up already?
I'm like barely even trying. I'm just trying to get through right now. Okay, I just don't care. That's kind of how I feel. I'm just trying to get through it all.
Saiyans are a race of send your prayers.
We watch your father through cracks in the wall as he begins to become more violent. At this point in the game, fingers blur as he stresses his illness, causing his scripts to become loaded with overly sentimental depictions of his serene family life, resulting in film studios no longer watching. This was tremendous story radio show that sounds very much like a complaining about your husband's anger. At this point in the story, you know how much family means to you, and the pain and humiliation you would have felt in this moment is palpable, and it really feels like because my mind is in control.
Come, I'll crush you!
Begins to believe that Winter, Hugh, and her god Siggy Guain are he and his family's only remaining path to salvation. And slowly begins to lose touch. Devotion experienced descent into darkness like a strong instinct. It's that imagery juxtaposed with Fatima once picturesque family life that makes the experience so sad. What should be criticized itself begins to reflect the stories that stretches to impossible dimensions. It's through the apartments that devotion conveys the nightmare that the Do's lives have become. Over the course of the year, presented with the Do's
Have you said your prayer?
so, out of genuine love, she brings her to the place of instructs her that the only place of his heart is to submerge the little girl in his spiritual there is a sun towards the end it's all these different people dissatisfied those people everything this family went through, all the pain and horror, it was all caused by this one devotion. Devotion is the story of the past. Especially considering those specifically Chinese or at least until the
Good, keep it up, or else!
Really natural? Schmitz is. Forget natural ish. Schmitz is the only certified natural ingredient and crispy fresh. Damn. Schmitz. Really natural, really well.
What you're seeing here is a worship and towards the group's leader, a former stuntman who goes by the title of Sean. Leo Chong, who literally the leader of Zen, claims to be a living brother, capable of any sicknesses.
Still skyrocketing!
His followers attributing every positive even believing he can protect them from natural disasters. The abilities on him accused of joining the most marginalized members of society and manipulating them into donating large sums of rage while operating with zero impact. One of the most troubling parts of the result is that it isn't even about any organization. Groups like this are so common that they seem to have been described as an voice. And the reason for that is that after the oppression of the Parliament adopted very lax policies towards expression, especially towards organizations like people designed to operate in this is why devotion draws on something terrible, but also something happening in Taiwan.
Have you said your prayers? How do you like this? Oh, City, I was honestly hoping for more.
Actually, by this game. Devotion had an extremely successful launch earlier this year. The program was smashed hit on Twitch with thousands of reviews on Steam, placing the game on the overall positive. Once all that came to a halt, Jin really became no longer was also the subject of a popular internet meme likening him to Winnie the Pooh. A comparison that he did at so people doing that Winnie the Pooh was censored everything in the promotional material, as well as the movie for robbing of China. It's a shame because that movie is a devotion was taken out so very negative backlash against the game's handle and close detention and devotion over a candle and actually removing devotion from the story. I don't think that messages like this are the best way to criticize an oppressive regime, especially from a studio that has already very successfully criticized oppressive regimes, but I also think that regimes are paying workers' places in censorship and restricted use of human rights is in their word. According to a statement released by the Candle, the artist itself was just a placeholder and never meant to be real. What's intentional or not, it has led to a very complicated situation, with many Chinese players being less offended by the...
Have you said your prayers? Ready to face the strong god? How do you like this? I'll devour you all. How do you like What's a sad sight?
His cousin Shigeru and his mother, Seiya. As the family went over the cliff, Osume's cousin intends to shove her for betrayal, only for Seiya to grab her and panic as she clings to her son. The rest of the family laugh. After the war, Osume forest despicable as son but as they do, Osume's mother had just reinforced behind them, only warning the boys to step back from the cliff. But Shigeru...
Entertain me! Have you said your prayers? How's that? What a sad sight!
Whispers that the world is a more frightening place than we'd ever like to admit, as Osume is forced to live with the knowledge of what his mother has done, and in fear of what she might do to his. Instead, he weighs the simple human heart like a long time seems like a very, very bad time. And you know what? You also listen. See, I think to a lot of people, horror is still seen as a cheaper or less than film entertainment, something designed to scare and startle like a regular movie. And hey, I recently watched a film about a haunted elevator. I love these good comic horror, but the idea that that's all horror can be is one of the actually not and that's a viewpoint I've really tried to fall back on with these videos. And so before we dive into the trailer one, I first want to answer a little question, and that is, why horror? When we look back, there are two instincts that kept the human race going. Lust and fear. Lust has kept us existing, but fear has kept us alive. Without fear, we'd never have escaped our natural predators or devised the means to overcome them. Fear is an intrinsic part of being human, and all that horror is the commodification of fear. Since humans emerged as the undisputed champions of the food chain, our relationship with fear has changed. Outside some very unusual and specific circumstances, most people will go through their lives without ever having to confront the pure terror of fear. And while people not getting eaten is mostly a very good thing, it does mean that we lost touch with an ancient and intrinsic part of horror. And what horror does is let us reconnect to that horror. Let us discover things about ourselves in a way that normally entertainment specifically today, however, is horror. Horror can be incredibly powerful just through its image. And you can see this throughout history in a number of unsettling classical paintings, or even in the old museums, which feature detailed drawings of horrific sea creatures that potentially lay in wait in the cold darkness of the ocean. My extensive research shows that these creatures did not actually exist, but the reason they were there was likely to frighten sailors in order to keep them away from more mundane dangers like unknown. Possibly my favorite example of historical horror-based imagery, however, are the 15th and 16th century images of hell, and particularly from the artist Maijn. And I love these paintings. I mean, just imagine that you are a medieval farmer who spent your days toiling in the fields, tending to your livestock, never even laid eyes on anything that wasn't part of the natural world. And then just imagine the sheer mind-numbing terror and fear inside these paintings. How much more frightening and real the existence of a horrifying afterlife would become in the image. Horror imagery even in recent years in the 50s and 60s, appearing on the cover of cold horror magazines and on the pages of history comics. A movement that was unfortunately stunted by massive backlash. Something that I feel like most horror comics and movies that I recover from in the last 2 decades. But when the horror imagery is still alive and thriving is in the images of comics. Like the US, 50s Japan had a massive horror comics boom driven by titles like Kitaru of the Graveyard, introducing audiences to the creatures of giants. But without the same considerable backlash, that scene was
You know what?
relatively low cost.
And this is Super Potato! Ready for this? This will What's wrong? Are you going to let me win without letting me go all out?
Trapping us in prisons of our own flesh. That is a very specific kind of fear. But compare that to the images of Koji Matsumoto, whose illustrations capture the simple, morbid horror of encountering creatures far larger than angels be. Creating these nightmarish images where humanity is no longer it's small. Both these artists have incredible effort in screen horror, but the kind of horror those images convey is totally different. And so, with the mind, we ask the question, what is the horror of Trail of Blood? And the answer to that is the simple, intimate horror of human vision.
Have you said your prayers? How do you like this? I'll devour you all.
I like this.
I'll lose to you. What a sad sight.
And this is a common theme with Ishii. He writes about characters going through disturbing, frightening changes, whether it's direct allegories from puberty like his vampire manga Happiness, or a more subtle series in the Flowers of Evil, the story of a teenage love triangle that gradually spirals its characters into darker, more violent versions of themselves. That's why I think it's really good and you should read it and not watch it. And what makes the story so disturbing is how she is able to take these intimate, frightening moments in people's lives and track them and make us feel everything these characters are. And to show you what I mean, I want you to imagine that you are a small child walking in the path of your mother, but your realizing
Entertain me! Pull out the stuff! Already? I was honestly hoping for more!
From first person, forcing us to embody this small child, meaning that this first page carries the uncomfortable sinking feeling of losing your parents and your superpowers. But then when we turn the page and reveal this glorious face contorted in hate, this woman isn't staring at a character in the story, she's staring at us. And it's frightening, but it's this kind of subtle visual horror that makes Yoshi's work so disturbing. There's this insane Yoshi's illustrations. He's an incredible painter, able to create works of real, breathtaking beauty. But it's like there's always this other side. Always some little visual aspect that feels strange and wrong. A young girl gazing down the viewer that she's blood. A woman everyone differently, but when I read this panel, it filled me with what we can only describe as sheer pants-shitting terror. And what makes this scene so frightening is how she visually traps us in these moments. The entire scene unfolding from first person, forcing us to embody this small child, meaning that this first page carries the uncomfortable sinking feeling of losing your parents and your superpowers. But then, when we turn the page and reveal this glorious face contorted in hate, this woman isn't staring at a character in the story, she's staring at us. And it's reflecting, but it's this kind of subtle visual horror that makes Yoshi's work so disturbing. There's this unsettling quality to a lot of Yoshi's illustrations. He's an incredible painter, able to create works of real breathtaking beauty. But it's like there's always this little something. There's always some little visual aspect that feels strange and wrong. A young girl gazing down at the viewer, her cheek speckled with dried blood. A woman staring.
Cowardly!
Is going to define a lot about the kind of fear it creates. And this is where Trail of Blood's distinct emotional brand of fear really shines. When Trail of Blood first released, it was advertised as a new series full of chilling tales. And what they meant by this is that so much of Trail of Blood was taken up by far space. Which is passive without anything really happening. But because Yoshi's panels are so good at conveying this uncomfortable, uncanny feeling, when combined into pages, it creates this creeping atmosphere of dread. Focusing on the tiny details of the scene, but in doing so, grinding the pace of the story to a crawl and forcing us to experience every little sensation and emotion, each tiny jolt of panic and every little twinge of fear. Which is why some of the most disturbing moments of Trail of Blood can be as simple as a hand clasping over a shoulder, a startled, terrified glance, or an eye peering through an open doorway. It's not uncommon for multiple pages to pass without a word of dialogue or anything significant even. And it can be agonizing, but it's not touching but everything is how it pays off attention to the frights themselves. Frights that often consist of nothing more than the subtle, intimate horror of the face. Like a lot of things are Trail of Blood, that might not sound terrifying straight away, but think of it like this. A person's face is the most expressive part of them. Studies have identified 7 facial expressions that are natural for across all races and cultures, meaning we are biologically hardwired to express ourselves through our faces. The minute folds we're seeing and certain movements of our muscles indicating not only fear, but we should be treated with trust, caution, and fear. That's why it's so important for artists to have a solid understanding of the language of the human face and how to use it. As in the right hands, it can become a really powerful storytelling tool, conveying fictional creations as people.
Oh, look at that number! Big Bang! Kamehameha! Let's do this!
to feel But there's also this small issue that Osabe's cousin actually survived. Brain damaged and comatose, but alive. But as he begins to recover, the truth starts to slip out. Osabe's aunt slowly piecing together what really happened. And so when one day she appears in front of Osabe's school offering him a lift home, it's already kind of horrifying. The two riding in silence against a creeping sense of dread until finally she casually confronts Osabe and what really happened. And when Osabe lies again, she looks at him with this. This is the face of a woman who's just realized her sister-in-law tried to kill her son, and her nephew is lying to her. And it's horrifying. This is how Trail of Blood scares you. It creates these disturbing, frightening scenarios, building the tension of these scenarios through
All those absorptions.
crescendo that tension, these horrifying characters, it's this circle of horror that makes Trail of Blood so unique.
How do you like
Instances of this time in the touches. It starts with Osabe returning home, but as it goes, angry shading. He draws closer and it's once again. It's furious as to how Seiko isn't
Ready for this? Watch out! Sit down and listen now! This will begin! How could I lose to you? It's okay not to be as good as me.
On their shoes and that it's time to go. Seichi realizing with horror that she's speaking to a delusional version of him as a child, and as he peers into her eyes, he sees this. This is the face of a woman lost in a blissful, frightened illusion, one whose grasp on reality has slipped, and they have now fallen into a deep, violent madness. Now they're telling what they would do to her family, to her husband, to even her own son, and it's all there, plain to her face. There's no pleasant about this, but Trail of Blood is a story about a mother slowly going insane and potentially hurting her own child. And that's a subject so taboo that precious few pieces of horror ever even go near it. Reasonably so.
Entertain me! How's that? Pull out the stuff! How do you like this? What's wrong? Are you going to let me win without letting me go all out?
Something evil and horrible horrifying creep in. This is why I think the moment on the cliff is so horrifying. It's a moment where, for a second, Osame, this young kid, sees what his real name is. He sees that the person who has loved and protected him his entire life is also something terrifying and painful. And there's a real, pure horror in that moment. But there's also something kind of human in there too. Most people spend their childhood idolizing their parents, seeing them as this infinite.
Let's see how strong you can really be.
Will set in life. But as we get older, we realize that they're not that. They're just people. People who are as flawed and capable of evil as anyone else. That's a pretty frightening realization for most people. And all Trading Blood does is it takes that feeling and drags it into a searing, horrifying light. And doing so, exposing it, confronting us with the just people, and that in them lies the capacity for evil. That's why I love horror. It can be silly and fun and cathartic. It can also let us engage with the darkest parts of being human. And in doing so, help us understand them. That's why it bothers me when I feel like there's still
Have you said your prayers?
If you look at the list of the most popular things,
Entertain me!
listen to
How's that? Hey, what's wrong? Barrier! How could I lose to you?
As well as the just everything. This one, folks. Orc Fighter. Rhino Z. Shelfie. Eric VG. Grizzly Hair. Whitney Elston. And Shadow Magic. As ever, finding links for the Lost Video podcast or on Twitter. And natural friends. Take care of yourselves. Peace.
Can't wait to welcome you to your new home. No YouTube videos.
I see we share common roots. How do you like this? Too slow. Yeah! Ah! Yeah! Yeah! Ah! Yeah! Ah! Yeah! Too slow. How's that? Yeah! How's that? Enough tomfoolery! Now we fight! Fall back! Barrier! show you how it's... Already? I was honestly hoping for more.
The Baby is one of the most disturbing movies I've ever seen. It begins with Maijn, a social worker who's been assigned to a family. One mother, two daughters, and a fourth member known only as Baby, a fully grown adult man with the mind and behavior of an infant child. But Anne starts to notice how unusually protective the family are. She does, an unsettling question is trying to focus. Is this a person with a genuine psychological condition or a man who has been abused, traumatized, and contorted into the mental state of an infant? The Baby is a strange movie, and quite possibly the vehicle for someone's fetish. I'm trying to be the guy who plays the baby is the son of the executive producer, make that what you will. But none of that changes the fact that the idea it presents is disturbing. That we could be so damaged and contorted that we cease being what we are and become something else. And that's why, once after watching The Baby, I'll be staring down into my morning porridge when suddenly a scene from this movie will drive itself into my mind, and in that moment, that's the feeling one target. Movies that give you a different out of them than you are. My films do this. An appropriate topic considering it's Halloween November 14th. I'm not going to be talking about films that rely on gore or torture because that's too easy. However, there are fun things in all these movies, so I'm going to leave individual content warnings in this show, which you should check out if you're sensitive or want to watch any of these movies. Especially the last one, okay? Especially the last one. Finally, I'm going to use this as a chance to talk about some lesser known horror movies, so I can nearly guarantee that there is likely going to be something here you have never heard of. But if you haven't seen everything I talk about, comments below when you look on the complete and utter apathy. Parents is a 1989 movie about a troubled young lad, Bobby, who begins to suspect that his mother and father are not ordinary people, but that the meals they're feeding him are. The concept of being a kid and coming to realize that your parents are violent murderers is frightening, but what really brings that idea to life is how the film conveys visual. Michael is shocked to feel tiny and vulnerable, with his parents impossibly massive and imposing. In these disturbingly surreal scenes that take the prestige look of Perfect Family Picket Fence America and stabs it through with scenes of intense horror. Shots like the bloody hand spinning in the garbage processor of a pristine 1970s kitchen beautifully capturing the duality of the Lammies. They are the perfect family, they are violent killers. And it's how the unsettling visual direction of parents ensnares you in the mind, creating the feeling of being trapped in a child's nightmare. Disturbing imagery has a long history with horror, and was the driving force behind perhaps one of the first truly disturbing movies. A man sharpening a razor before turning the blade on his own fingernail, before then dragging it across a woman's eyeball. These are the opening moments of Ocean and the Illusion. Made in 1929 and running at 21 minutes, there were other horror movies before this, but Unshan and the Loo was different. As a movie, it makes no logical sense. A series of barely connected interactions punctuated by frightening, disquieting imagery. Insects pour out a gaping wound, a crowd peered down at a severed hand, a man drags two piano-stuck corpses of dead mules on his way to attack women.
Let's do this,
In
boo.
short, it's a collaboration between filmmaking narrow and serious figures. It's designed to elevate emotional trapped in social screen imagery Razorhead and where she wants to hold things there for as the space opens, there are
You're number one. Bring me your energy!
children but its strength is how it uses the medium to create a physical space that feels like losing your fucking mind. And it's films like this that make me so disappointed that animation isn't more, likely due to the antiquated idea that animation is a medium for children. But there is a kind of fun middle ground, and that is when a children's movie nosedives into pure object horror. Take a movie like The Adventures of Maijn, a very normal kids movie for about 40 minutes, and then this happens.
An angel. What's your name? Satan.
What follows is 4 minutes of, and I shit you not, Satan explaining to 3 children how humans are nothing, existence is meaningless, and all life is fragile, finite, and pointless.
Dang.
And it's horrifying! What is this doing in a kids' movie? None of the rest of the film is like this! But I think there's something kind of compelling here. And I want to be clear, all we do, which is a lot of
Get ready!
Alright! Come on, give me all you got!
What makes that journey the unflinching level of cruelty this movie shows towards these characters, made worse by them genuinely like dogs while fishing in the field. One thing I love about dogs, one thing I love about my dog, is they are innocents. They don't quite understand how the world works, but they are always trying to. And you can feel that innocence in Alfred Schnitter. Once that's innocence that was subjected to first in nightmarish conditions of the research lab, and later to be beautiful as the two struggle to survive in a place that is I don't want to spoil anything, but there are moments in this movie that are so shocking that they were cut from the original theatrical release, and trust me when you see them. Oh, is this a horror movie? Well, is it for a dog? Between this because the politics is something is accepted by society.
Let's do this.
Bringing to light a very real part of our history, as well as the absolute horror. This to me is a huge part. It takes it as a horror from scary to disturbing. The part that, no matter how easily you may dismiss these supernatural rules or ghosts, there's some insidious sliver of truth that is so much undeniable. Relic begins with a mother and daughter arriving at the home of their grandmother, who has disappeared and been missing for several days. Could you make their way to the house and notice things and
You just asked one of 1,000 days. Soon. Very soon.
with me, they're able to escape the feeling that there is something watching them from within the walls of the home, when suddenly their grandmother
I see you, Jack. Love the stuff. Fall back.
Single subtle facial expression that most horror movies can with 90 minutes of runtime. For a film with some real, unspeakable nightmare imagery, the most disturbing moments of this movie is just her alone in the subway tunnel, losing her mind, descending into a violent madness as she succumbs to the darker forces that may be repeating all of her. The film does occasionally get under into weird, nonsensical territory, and I do worry its attitude towards women's sexuality is a little cheese. But it is a disturbing look at dark and horrifying places in a damaged relationship can bring us into gravity wisely. Whoa, things are getting a little dark here. So I'd say we take a fun little intermission to talk about movie funny games. An Austrian family take a weekend away in their luxurious holiday home, only to be greeted by their neighbours, a pair of kooky, fun-loving knuckleheads. And what unfolds is a heartwarming weekend of comedy, romance, and most of all, friendship. since, I've never met a single person who's heard of it, and it was only recently I was able to try to get a copy. It's called Last Summer. Three teenagers find a seagull fishing. They don't know each other, but decide that together they're going to nurse the bird to help. And as they do, a bond forms between them. Their parents seem oblivious to their existence, and so they comfort each other. They go to the movies, they smoke their parents' weed, they tell each other secrets, and it all has this kind of awkward innocence to it. All marks of a feel-good teen summer. But it's like there's always this edge. Piece of dialogue will feel sharper and more callous than seems warranted. Scenes feel unsettling, tense, and suddenly cut way before you can establish what it was they wanted. While these teenagers are innocent, in that innocence, we start to see the capacity for a kind of pure art. They test a layer of
I see we share time
about a lot of dark stuff today, and the question we have to come back to is why? Why would you put yourself through any of this? Well, for me, I've talked before about how horror can help us confront the most upsetting parts of the world we live in, and do so on our terms. I think there's real comfort, but I think with movies like this, there's a little reason to. When a horror film gets me, really gets me. When I am staring down into my bowl of porridge, a baby or a possession or my summer drives itself into my mind, that's also a moment I'm free from all other worries. I'm not thinking about my job or my personal life or the fact that the world feels more on fire now than
I see we share. How's that? Too slow. How's that? Enough tomfoolery. Now we fight. Fall back. honestly hoping for more.
2018 is one of the stranger and more unsettling occurrences to ever be recorded in history. It began when a woman stepped out onto the streets of Strasbourg, France, and without music or direction, began singing and dancing. People were initially entertained, but things slowly grew more concerning when, after 6 days, she still hadn't stopped, and bizarrely, 33 other people joined her, all dancing in eerie silence without breaths. And if some sources can be believed, this dance lasted for an entire month, with as many as 400 people suffering the same dancing madness. Some of whom even died from exhaustion and heat stroke before one afternoon they all just stopped and returned to their daily lives. The dancing plague was one of the earliest
Let's do this move.
There's something so exceedingly falling victim to the same as if we weren't
Hey, what's wrong?
First time, very simple. And if that sounds familiar to some themes we talked about in the video, please.
Get ready!
Each episode of Agent tells a different story in its own distinct terms. With the cast of protagonists consisting of everything from school children to police officers and paramedics. It's an amusing structure that this one is the La La Land. But while that show is making serendipitous connections people make, where those connections are in society in surprising ways, Paranoia Agent instead looks at how one tiny event can so drastically affect a community at large. And the event that sets all these distinct narratives in motion is the assault of Tsukiko Sagi, who's also the main character of our first episode. Tsukiko is a character designer and the creator of the massively popular Naomi, a small pink dog who has developed an obsessive Hello Kitty fan following. Tsukiko is under intense pressure at work to produce a living mascot, Cash Cow, but in a scene that I'm sure will be painfully familiar to any illustrators out there, Tsukiko spends her days slamming delete on the keyboard, erasing concept after concept, unable to come up with any fresh ideas. Pressure on Tsukiko mounts until one night she's walking home, exhausted and stressed to the point of collapse, when suddenly she falls victim to a brutal assault at the hands of a young boy, wearing golden rollerblades and building a bent baseball. Without a suspect or even a motive to work with, police had a baffled immediate, and they would wonder if it happened at all, until similar attacks began occurring all over the city, all citing the same boy with the same twisted baseball. The story eventually gets picked up by the media, and people attacker the inappropriately cute title Little Slugger, or in Japanese, Shonen Battle, which are both silly names, so I'm just going to stick to the version of it that counts my native tongue, which, due to 12th century British shenanigans, is English. This is the general structure of Paranoia Agent's episodes. We get a different main character struggling with some intense emotional crisis, who eventually fall victim to extreme. But what elevates the show according to that conventional episode are categories like Hellboy, with the unique way the characters are narrated, written, as well as the overall story these characters. Basically, the characters are only representation of two specific aspects of characters. In reality, the day-to-day struggle in which each of these characters live, fantasy is without semblance. And a lot of horror of the show actually is first the day-to-day reality of these characters. And you have to say terrifying but something isn't. Agents doesn't really operate in the same spectrum. Power is something that's really. It's more that the ideas that the show presents are starting in a human renewal. Power is subject to social isolation, sexual oppression, and abuse. With the agent in such a particular style of power with such a large cast of characters is that no matter who you are and what stage you are in, you're likely to relate to at least one or more of the subjects that different explore. For me personally, as someone who spends a lot of their career working in animation studios, the episode focusing on the disastrous production of Maijn and so personal, it was honestly chilling. Watching as each member of the team slowly succumbs to the stress and panic in the face of spectators. And as they do, become victims of the destroyers of powers and shapes. And the subject matter of these just as unsettling as certain topics that she explores, that is, nearly the which creates this intense feeling of dissonance as the tone of the episode is violently opposite to the cause. For example, would be an episode which is possibly parallel at least but also as it's an episode simply important one field of nature. There's a general reason for it until you realize that you're actually the horror from parallel agent to society. And it's this grounded, reality-based horror that generates the fantasy that's present in each there's a quote from Satoshi Kon that states, a world echoes the seas is filtered by fantasy and possess tragic hero doing what he wants to be great but in reality, it's actually the kind of shield that lectures from the potential for alcohol, all girls as well as the episode
okay not to be as good as me.
That cuts back and forth between an old school Fist of the North Star style seinen manga, all while our protagonist commits increasingly heinous crimes. And it creates this amazing juxtaposition between the actions our character is carrying out and the fantasy of how he justifies it to himself. And this is a major theme throughout the characters of Pen and Agent. Each one of them has some form of fantasy that they escape into when the burdens of day-to-day life begin to weigh too heavily on them. And the reason this aspect of the show works so well is it plays directly into one of Satoshi Kon's greatest strengths as a director. His ability to treat reality as a malleable, transformable thing, something that can warp and distort under human perception, and give that sensation visual form. This was the basis for a lot of the mind-bending visuals from Paprika, with reality shifting as the characters enter different states of dreaming, But the same technique is used in Paranoia Agent to illustrate the particular viewpoints of each of its characters, with each character's individual fantasy given specific visual treatment, such as Zukiko, the character design, whose moronic blush will start moving by itself and speaking to her, distracting her from the torrent of abuse she regularly receives online, and assuring her that everything will be okay. And I'm particularly fond of Momo's animation of these scenes, as the animators actually take into account her disproportionate design, as she struggles to move around or with the waves behind her. It's endearing as hell, but it's also a really interesting way of showing that a creature like this shouldn't physically exist, playing up just how disconnected from reality Tsukiko's fantasy